Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and we have an update with Jason again. Jason Jeffries is going to give us the latest updates and charts that he has put together that shows a hypothesis of when we could be getting pretty close here to Planet X. So every time we have Jason on the show, he brings something new to the table. Jason, thanks a lot for joining us here. How the heck are you?
Doing good as usual, Rex. Glad to hear from you again.
Absolutely. Let's rock and roll, man. Show us the stuff. What do we got?
Well, I've been hearing and paying attention to the comments a lot, communicating with a lot of people, and I'm coming to the understanding that they're getting really conflicted with the paperwork I showed, like the Science Digest and all that, where it showed out at 50 billion miles, there was a binary object, and then they showed an object in between those, and then they showed our sun. What they didn't show you was it said beside it that was the apogee, that was its furthest point out. So my hypothesis is there could literally be another object, a binary out there, and this red dwarf that comes in could be either an unformed trinary or basically an unformed planet, because as the mass, it's the laws of gravity and just how the universe works. After you get so much mass, you become either a gas giant or a very small star. Planets with terrestrial, land and the way we know a solid planet only gets so big and then it turns into a gas giant. It's just the way things work. So the red dwarf would be basically a small star that never got hot enough to ignite its nuclear furnace, so it wouldn't be emitting light in the sense that we would see it. It would have a red glow around it and would have atmospheric effects. We would obviously see it, but it wouldn't give off the same type of light that our sun would. The point is, what I was getting at is, if this thing's coming in at an elliptical angle, that's why I did this diagram here. Actually, you can do this on your own programs. There's just a bunch of Flash programs and things like that out there that allow you to do these type of things. There's the sun in the middle. This right here is the elliptic of our sun. That's the equator, if you will. That's where all the planets stay. That's basically, like I said, the equator of the sun, and everything's pulled to that kind of center line and rotates around that. So that yellow is level with the blue that the Earth goes around and everything else goes around. This red is coming down from underneath, and it crosses above the ecliptic. That's the point that we were trying to make here. My hypothesis, and most likely the hypothesis of everybody working on this, especially the brilliant minds out there that's really done this and dug into this, they even the Sumerian tablets, when you look at those, you can realize that this thing had its own rotation. It came in, it was elliptical, it came from what they appeared to south, this and that. We can derive a lot of data from that. But why can't we see it? Why is there sightings of it? Why isn't it just a constant, we see this thing solidly every day, that's where it is, like you can with the North Star, the moon, everything else in the sky? Well, my hypothesis is we're rotating around this. It's rotating like this, but as it's rotating and coming around this thing, crossing our ecliptic, basically rising up into the northern hemisphere's view, because anything below that, you just physically can't see. The Earth blocks it. It's like trying to look behind you almost, or look underneath you. You just can't physically see it, not even from a telescope. It'd be useless. You're looking in the wrong direction. So it gets close. This hypothesis maybe had the relation with the Mayan calendar. Maybe this is what they're trying to tell us. Maybe in December 21st, that is when the Earth would start to come back around in the circle again. It would basically reach its point farthest north of the circle we'd call, the orbital plane, and then start going back around again. So they were marking the time that this thing maybe became visible or started to rise above the ecliptic again. Basically a solar cycle showing you the orbits of the binaries. So this thing really is coming in, is my hypothesis. And we know that when these binaries, they don't rotate around each other, they rotate around the center of gravity, a point between them. And it's usually close to the bigger star. It's just physics. Everybody doesn't really take a genius to actually look into that and figure that out. But it'd be a point close to it. So we could say that this thing possibly comes in, doesn't get any closer than Jupiter and Mars, as a lot of people say. But as this thing's coming around, you got to picture this orbit isn't like the orbit we see. This thing has its own ecliptic plane, and it crosses another. So this thing right here is rotating around this, just as our moon would, and just as we do the sun, but this thing is doing it at an angle. So this thing is going to rotate around this. So basically where you see it, it would come back down and go back around, come back down, go back around, and keep doing this in a corkscrew around this. And as you keep coming, and keep coming, but the point being is it, no matter what, is if this thing, even the binary sun was there, so if they were hiding this with chemtrails, and we could see it in certain conditions, which we've seen in numerous videos, especially from Bill Martin. I think he has the most credible footage he's collected of the binary sun. You don't really put too many on there that are, you could call lens flares, because there's literally just impossible. They're behind trees, they got limbs and the branches. And if you track that, you can tell that this thing is going around. So when it came around, basically Nibiru, the planet that rotates around this, is my hypothesis is it comes around and it literally drops below the ecliptic, all right, every time. It's doing its own rotation, so no matter how close it is to our sun, it's still going to rotate down below the ecliptic because of the angle, and then as it rotates around its just normal orbit like a moon of its sun, it pops up into view. Once it pops up into view, blam, there it is. That's when the chemtrails, that's when the meteorites, that's when the earthquakes, the floods, anything crazy happens. What we need to do is really look back at when that meteor strike hit in Russia. I believe above all in anything that was proof that this magnetic shield pushed this rock at us, basically. People don't realize it doesn't have to pull it by, okay? When this thing comes, it's pushing things in front of it. This magnetic aura is pushing rocks towards us. Okay? It takes one of those rocks to hit our sun. Blam, done.
Let me jump in real
EMP.
quick. Now, when I was out at the McDonald Observatory in Fort Davis, Texas, and they do these sun shows every day, and they have star parties where you can see different planets. And I got to tell you, the telescopes they got out there are literally world class. They have multi-story nitrous tanks just to keep these things cool. I mean, they are absolutely incredible. And I talked to the customer relations guy there. I think his name was Ron. I can't remember off the top of my head. Super nice guy. I ended up bumping into him when he was actually getting into the Suburban to drive down to the gift shop down there. And I said, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions? I'm with Leak Project. This is on the record. He said, sure. And I asked him some questions about Nibiru. I talked to him about the chemtrails and the sun being more extreme. And real nice guy. I don't know, just because he says they haven't found a Planet X doesn't mean it doesn't exist by any means. What I would like to do is, since I'm going back out there, Jason, give me some coordinates, and maybe I can work something out with the media relations guy there or somebody at the higher levels to discover something like this. Because if it's out there, I'm telling you, there's so many people that go to college that are studying astronomy, and they really want to find that gem, and if they could, they'd do it. You know, even though there's a lot of people that say, hey, they've signed disclosure agreements. I'm sure people have signed certain disclosure agreements where they can't say stuff, but there's going to be that college kid out there that's going to school and he wants to discover this, or somebody else out there that's a professional that might not know. You know, so give me some coordinates, something I can work with. I will drive back out there and I will spend the money and time to get the images. So just wanted to throw that out there. And if there's anybody else that listens to this podcast, if you know of some coordinates you want to look at with a world-class telescope, if I can do it, I will. Guest bookings at leakproject.com.
The problem with that is it's in the northern hemisphere. Other than that, we have a time limit. You basically would have to be there at the right time, and they'd have to allow you to view it at the right time. And my guess is if you could look at the sun basically just when it's rising and setting, no 11 o'clock, 90-degree angle stuff because of the angle of the lens coming out of the telescope and the angle of the sun. They'll specifically set it up so it's a 90-degree angle, and the chemtrails and the atmospheric effects perfectly work. I mean, everybody understands the concept. We cannot see the stars in the daytime. Okay, it's the same concept. This ozone is being thickened, and we can't see what's coming at us. That's all it is. I could get you some coordinates, and my guess is if this prediction's right, if this thing's rotating basically north to south in our perception of this, we'll say north to southwest around this globe where it is at that point. Like I said, this thing is going to come around, but imagine that is rotating like a corkscrew around this red line as it comes through. So it gets to this point and it's actually rotating at us. So when it was above the sun, the streaks would look straight up and down, straight towards us and back at, when it comes over here, it would be more of an angle, like I said, and start going back. But this right here is the point we're worried about. And I think I have this up here. I made second where it goes over. Basically, you see as it comes over, that was the point where it was coming in, I say around 2012. This is I'm saying any time between this December and next December would be the final deadline if this thing, by the math and the photos, if it's right and the calculations are right and everything's right, this thing will be its closest very, very, very soon. It'll just blam, it'll appear. My prediction is we'll start seeing floods, earthquakes, and volcanoes within like the next week or two. Literally within the next couple weeks, we'll start seeing them. Like West Virginia just had the 1,000-year flood, killed 25 people. It's the worst flood recorded in 1,000 years. So how does that work? How do they record a flood in West Virginia 1,000 years ago when America's only, what, 200 and some years old? I mean, how did that go down? So explain the logic behind that. But anyways, that 25 people died from that. 55 people were struck with lightning in India. Same storm. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen, okay? It just doesn't happen. What I really think is going on is exactly this. It's going around, it's rotating, and that's what's happening. It's when it's rotating around this, it's basically doing just like I said, as the sun and the earth and the moon does it with us, but it's coming at an angle, so it would be corkscrewed coming through. That's why that would only appear in the sky at certain times. That's the one that we're watching for, the one with the double wings coming off of it. The object's so big that there's literally two lines. Is it close because it's out here? It's fine. But when it comes close and it gets in close to this, it's got the brown dwarf and our sun. So the atmosphere, just like it says in the Sumerian tablets, depletes. Like you're literally burning it off as it gets close. And we're seeing the smoke come off of it. We're seeing the particles, the matter turn to dust in the space. This huge tail, the dragon. It makes total sense. That's why it depletes. That's why the gold, they need to shield it. An astronaut's mask has this gold all over the face of it. It's to reflect those rays. It's to reflect you from the harmful rays in space. They know this. That's why they're cheming. People think of chemtrails and they think, okay, one source, there's one reason. But that's not. How many reasons can you think of to use an aerosol can, Rex? I mean, how many personal reasons and chemicals and different things could you fit into an aerosol can? You know, the variety comes from gardening to hair care to literally first aid that you'd spray on an open wound to whatever chemicals that you wouldn't spray on a weed in your garden for fear that it isn't something. I don't know what to tell you. It's an application process. That's all it is. The chemtrails have many agendas. They do many things. But the idea of them cheming with these metals that they do that we can test for is because they each reflect their own wavelength in the electromagnetic frequency wavelength band of radiation from gamma to radio. And it's the ozone, it's the atmosphere. It's why we can't see the stars. It's not a real hard concept to understand. There's so much cognitive dissonance basically because of what we're taught. You're growing up and you were only taught the books that they present to you. And that was hard enough. You're like, man, I don't want to listen to this, blah, blah, blah. You know, everybody's young and rebels. They only have a thirst for certain knowledges. And whatever knowledge that intrigues you is what pulls you onto the subject, what is your divine spark, and it's what holds your interest. And that, I believe, is your higher self talking to you and communicating for whatever reason, saying, hey, hold on to this. There's so much data to sift through. This one's for you. Not any of that. Don't overlook that. The idea of this, because it goes back to, like I said, if they would teach us the real history, show us that basically history is only written by what the victors of whatever society that's there. You know, like if me and you got in a fight and had an argument, we're going to tell our side of the argument to whoever. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and we're just going to tell our side of the story, and that's it. Now, when it comes to war, that means people are dying. So if generations of people get killed off, and the clan, the surviving members of this clan and the people that were warring, they're the ones telling the story, so they're going to tell it to fill their agenda and fit their agenda. And you can look at world history and see this everywhere. That's why you see these people and their religions, they really have a hard time seeing how Jesus could be Thoth or, you know, Jehovah and all these different people. They don't see how Enki and Enlil and these can be in the Bible and can be in the Quran and be in all these, because they're only taught one aspect of it. If they were taught and read every aspect of every culture from every perspective. They would have the wider picture, they would have every puzzle piece, and then they could make their own judgment. Okay, that's not what happens. And we have what's called cognitive dissonance, and it's something that people really need to look into because everybody battles that. Everybody does. When you were taught something your whole life, and then your other part of your brain saying, hey, this presents facts that says you're wrong, and you have been wrong, and everything you base those ideas off are wrong, your brain conflicts. You're using your left brain and right brain at the same time, and it just doesn't work. You start rejecting, you get aggressive, you might lash out at people, you might just start being basically closed-minded. It literally releases a chemical in your brain that makes you closed-minded. It's a defense mechanism. It's basically a survival skill that we don't need anymore. And to overcome this, that's when you're truly awakened. You know, to be awakened, basically, it has nothing to do with, you know, being rude and smug on YouTube comments and this and that. Like, why would these people spend their time, go out of their way to come here and get on our sites, look at our work, and then spread disinformation or negativity and claim to be enlightened, when that right there is the first sign that truly somebody is not awakened at all. I mean, being smug over the internet, that, you know, kind of denotes the whole process. So, point is, I know you're a busy man, Rex. I wanted to update this. I will keep working. I'm going to try to get a couple people help me throw this together, some people that are good with numbers and doing these orbital diagrams. So I'm not the only one. I have a couple fresh takes, and we're going to do some work. That way you don't have to search all the channels and look here and there to piddle it and piece it together. We're going to do that for you. We're going to do the work. We're going to break this down. I truly believe that it's here and it's coming. Rex is a different person. He has to be agnostic as he can on everything and give you a neutral, you know, point of view from the subject. So that in itself should be a blessing to you, to realize that this man is going out of his way to present both sides of the story and not just one to benefit himself.
Well, and I appreciate that, Jason, because, you know, it really is difficult to stay neutral on a lot of subjects. I'm a human being too, and I can get passionate just like everybody else. If anything, I probably get a lot more passionate about things. You guys just haven't seen me go on one of my extreme rants yet. You'll have to become a member at Leak Project to hear that stuff, you guys. But anyway, Jason, man, it's great to have you on the show. I appreciate you coming on. I've got to bounce right now because we're going to be talking to Gerald Clark here with an update. And also, I want to thank you for getting us on the John Moore show. That was an incredible broadcast. Then he came on our show, so that's actually just uploaded as we're discussing this conversation. So thank you, Jason. You have a wonderful day. Folks, go to leakproject.com, subscribe, become an exclusive member, and you'll have access to some fantastic content where we're actually going on scene, getting video footage. Hopefully, we'll have enough money here to get a drone pretty soon so we can get you stuff that's just off the charts. Thank you, everybody, for all your contributions. Stay safe and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and we have an update with Jason again. Jason Jeffries is going to give us the latest updates and charts that he has put together that shows a hypothesis of when we could be getting pretty close here to Planet X. So every time we have Jason on the show, he brings something new to the table. Jason, thanks a lot for joining us here. How the heck are you?
Doing good as usual, Rex. Glad to hear from you again.
Absolutely. Let's rock and roll, man. Show us the stuff. What do we got?
Well, I've been hearing and paying attention to the comments a lot, communicating with a lot of people, and I'm coming to the understanding that they're getting really conflicted with the paperwork I showed, like the Science Digest and all that, where it showed out at 50 billion miles there was a binary object, and then they showed an object in between those, and then they showed our sun. What they didn't show you was it said beside it that was the apogee, that was its furthest point out. So my hypothesis is there could literally be another object, a binary out there, and this red dwarf that comes in could be either an unformed trinary or basically an unformed planet, because as the mass, it's the laws of gravity and just how the universe works. After you get so much mass, you become either a gas giant or a very small star. Planets with terrestrial, land, and the way we know a solid planet only gets so big and then it turns into a gas giant. It's just the way things work. So the red dwarf would be basically a small star that never got hot enough to ignite its nuclear furnace, so it wouldn't be emitting light in the sense that we would see it. It would have a red glow around it and would have atmospheric effects. We would obviously see it, but it wouldn't give off the same type of light that our sun would. The point is, what I was getting at is, if this thing's coming in at an elliptical angle, that's why I did this diagram here. Actually, you can do this on your own programs. There's just a bunch of Flash programs and things like that out there that allow you to do these type of things. There's the sun in the middle. This right here is the elliptic of our sun. That's the equator, if you will. That's where all the planets stay. That's basically, like I said, the equator of the sun, and everything's pulled to that kind of center line and rotates around that. So that yellow is level with the blue that the Earth goes around and everything else goes around. This red